And we are live on YouTube.
All right. Welcome everybody to House Energy and Digital Infrastructure. It's Thursday, May 15th. And we are here to learn about emerging trends and state policies in artificial intelligence with Chelsea Canada from the National Conference of State Legislatures. So we're going to have the chance to zoom out and take a national look, which is always really helpful. So we'll go around the room and introduce ourselves, and then we'll turn it over to you, Chelsea. I'm Representative Kathleen James from the Bennington 4 District.
Richard Bailey, Lamoille 2.
Chris Morrow, Wyndham, Windsor, Bennington.
Michael Southworth, Caledonia 2.
Christopher Howland, Rutland 4.
Dara Torrey, Washington 2.
Graham Kleppner, Chittenden 13, Burlington.
And I'm Scott Campbell, representative from St. Johnsbury.
And Jack Logger, committee assistant.
Great. And I'm sure Rep. Sibilia will be joining us. Chelsea, for the record, you are.
Madam Chair, members, my name is Chelsea Canada, and I'm a program principal at the National Conference of State Legislatures.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us. We have your written testimony. Do you want to share slides or just walk us through it? It's up to you.
Yes, let me try and share my screen.
Okay.
Are you all seeing the slides?
Star.
Yep.
Great. Well, Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. As I mentioned, my name is Chelsea Canada, and at the National Conference of State Legislatures, I cover privacy and technology topics, including artificial intelligence, on the state policy team based out of our Denver office. Before I dive into our discussion about AI, I know a lot of you know about NCSL, but I'd like to quickly introduce us and the work that we do. For those of you that aren't familiar and may be newer to the legislature, NCSL is the country's most trusted bipartisan organization, serving legislators and staff for 50 years. We serve all 50 states, territories, and commonwealths. NCSL is headquartered in Denver, Colorado, where we provide comprehensive and unbiased research on state policies and legislative institutions. We also have a small office in Washington, D.C., and their work focuses on ensuring state legislatures have a strong, cohesive voice in the federal system. NCSL doesn't make policy recommendations, nor do we advocate certain positions to states. Instead, we promote policy innovation and facilitate communication amongst states. We do this because we believe in the importance of the legislative institution and know that when states are strong, our nation is strong. Here's an agenda which shows a roadmap of what I plan to cover with you today. First, I'll share an overview of AI regulation across the states, including AI 2024 and 2025 highlights. I'll then cover comprehensive AI regulation measures that have been enacted across the U.S. I'll also highlight other pieces of legislation that have been targeted at more specific AI use cases. I'll then cover AI government use and the regulation and oversight measures we've seen across state legislatures and states, and walk through some government AI use examples. And finally, I'll cover legislative AI use. Our organization has been polling some members and have some insights on what staff and legislators are doing with the tools within their own state legislatures that I'll share with you. Finally, I'll leave you with some resources related to this topic for you to refer to later. You've probably come across our website previously, but we have a comprehensive collection of resources related to this topic. As you all know, AI like ChatGPT and Bard have received significant attention in the news recently. Although concepts of AI were first discussed in the 1950s, in the last decade, the rate of adoption and use of this technology has increased exponentially. At NCSL, we've tracked AI legislation for the past 6 years, and as you can imagine, the numbers of bills introduced each year with growing interest continue to increase. With no major federal legislation enactments focusing on regulating AI use and/or protecting people from the potential harms of AI and other automated systems currently in place, states are moving ahead to address potential harms from these technologies, and we've seen bipartisan efforts in state legislatures seeking to find a balance between protections for citizens while also enabling innovation in state government services and the commercial use of AI. Almost all states who had a legislative session during 2024, including Puerto Rico and the US Virgin Islands and the District of Columbia, introduced legislation last year, demonstrating how state legislatures have been busy discussing AI issues. Over 450 bills and resolutions were introduced across the states in 2024, and 31 states, Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, adopted resolutions or enacted legislation.
Fantastic, never better.
This year, the momentum continues to grow. We've already seen over double the amount of pieces of legislation introduced in this category so far. That list is shifting every day, but the last time I pulled it, there's over 1,000 proposals that were introduced this year. So 48 states and Puerto Rico have introduced legislation, and 26 states adopted or enacted over 75 new measures so far. Here's a graph that shows the types of bills introduced across the states in 2025 to give a little bit of flavor to what we're talking about and the diversity of proposals. As you can see, categories range from housing to energy use to creating new crimes, among other topics and strategies. Bills specific to the private sector, government, responsible use, and education use continue to take top spots over the last few years. Legislation related to health use has continued to increase and took a new spot in this tracking this year. The life cycle of an AI system includes many components, particularly the design, development, deployment, and use of the system. And risks can develop across multiple points within the life cycle, influenced and impacted by many actors, such as developers, deployers, end users, and the public. And strategies for regulating AI can range from looking at the technology explicitly or focusing on its impacts and uses. Evidence from the state, federal, and international stage show that leaders on all levels are grappling with many legal and societal impacts the technology can have. On this slide, I have categories of considerations that have come up regarding AI governance. So moving around this circle, we're going to start with privacy and data protection. Since AI needs data to function, some state lawmakers are looking to put in place or expand existing consumer data privacy laws to apply to automated decision-making, as an example. States are also considering and enacting specific requirements related to requiring deployer and developers of AI systems to document and report data governance measures used to cover training data sets, measures used to examine the suitability of data sources, and adhere to risk management standards. Second, state legislators are focused on transparency. State legislation regarding disclosures of data sources used to train artificial intelligence systems and mechanisms like watermarking and disclosures to help identify when artificial intelligence has been used. Several of the bills that have passed in this area require disclosures that AI have been used in the development of political advertisements. A few states have also proposed legislation to require watermarks on images created by AI. Third, when thinking about the decisions and actions of an AI system, the question of who bears responsibility has emerged. For instance, if a person is denied access to loans or housing due to bias in the system, or if an AI system failure results in other harms to persons or property, how should fault be apportionated, and should any remedies be available to ensure that the mistake will not be repeated? Fourth, constituent and consumer impact. Legislators across the country express concerns with the potential constituent and consumer impact around using these tools. The majority of legislative action so far has been focused on government use because of the sensitivity of the data used within state agencies and legislators' concern on technology use impacting their constituents. Because of the vast amount of possibilities with AI use, legislators are concerned with potential harms that can happen to consumers, especially when the technology is used in high-risk scenarios without human oversight. As you'll hear today, state legislators are starting to take substantial steps forward to also regulate private sector use because of this same concern. Fifth, policymakers have zeroed in on the possibility of decisions made by machines to be biased and potentially discriminate against consumers. And finally, the rapid development and emergence of generative AI have bumped up against copyright and intellectual property rights. AI developers are facing lawsuits brought by content owners and copyright holders who argue the developers have built and trained their models using large quantities of copyrighted material. In this next part of the presentation, I'll focus.
Chelsea, sorry, we have a question. I'm sure you can't see hands go up, so I'll just need to.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes.
No problem. Rep Bailey.
Thank you. I would like you to explain a little bit more about this AI watermark.
Yeah. So there's been
Is this something that automatically goes on whatever this thing generates? That tells it's generated by AI?
Yeah, so I think there's a few different things happening in this space right now. I've heard like from the private sector, there's companies that, are that have photo editing tools, for example. Adobe is really public about this. They've been working with folks across the industry to figure out tools to create some sort of watermark, right? Or some and not necessarily, there's different options for it. So it could be visible on the photo, or there could be an option where you could click on it and it shows kind of where the origin of the photo was. So it could say like the original file of the photo, it was or not manipulated, but it was processed using AI and say kind of the date and the time. That's what we've seen from industry proposals coming forward. But what we've seen within the proposals, within regulation, you're correct. It's more general saying that, there has to be either a track record of, the data path. So these bills are known as like data provenance bills, but then there also are some proposals out there that do want a physical watermark. So beyond kind of hovering over and seeing data, having it out front so that automatically that image was being changed from the original form.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Any other questions on this slide? Okay.
Great. Yeah. So in this next part of the presentation, I'll focus on 3 trends that have risen to the top regarding AI related laws that have passed. As you saw from my previous slides, there's a lot of proposals out there, but that's different from, what has passed. So we have an article on the NCSL's website that summarizes these trends and actions. And I have it linked in the last resources slide too, if you want to refer to at a later date. But states have started to consider and pass comprehensive AI legislation focused on consumer protections and transparency. So that's one bucket. Other states have considered and passed laws that are targeted to specific AI uses. For example, recently, at least half of states passed new laws targeted at deepfake use in elections and sexually explicit materials. And that last trend that we identified was that 2 states really came out front last year, even though there were a ton of proposals that had similar elements or had similar spirit, but there were 2 comprehensive laws that were passed by two states, Colorado and Utah, specifically focused on consumer protections and safety. So Colorado enacted SB 205, a comprehensive AI law that applies to high-risk systems and requires developers and deployers to avoid algorithmic discrimination in consequential decisions. Go ahead.
I just wanted to stop you for a minute. I want to make sure I really understand the Colorado bill. So I'm not sure the length of your presentation today, but I wanted to allow a little bit of time to have you really dive into the Colorado bill a little bit more, maybe the Utah bill a little bit more. So if that's coming up in your presentation, I don't want to interrupt you now, but I would start with general purpose versus high risk AI. I'm really curious about to learn more about these two bills.
Yeah, totally. So I'll go over what I prepared in my comments for this slide, but happy to take more questions after if you have specific questions that I didn't.
Okay, that's fine. We'll come back.
Or after this slide.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, because I might address the question.
Okay.
So I'll start over with Colorado's bill. So last year they enacted SB 205. It's considered a comprehensive bill, applies to high-risk systems. It requires developers and deployers to avoid algorithmic discrimination and consequential decisions. And in the bill, it defines where these consequential decisions can happen. So that's in education, employment, financial or lending services, essential government services, healthcare services, housing, insurance, or legal services. So they have a whole slew of industries and sectors that they're targeting that could have a significant impact on folks if there was some sort of discrimination or bias within the system. So developers, they have specific requirements and deployers have specific requirements. So some are the same, some are different, but developers must disclose known or inappropriate uses of the technology and also describe what data was used to train the high-risk models. And deployers are required to implement a risk management policy and conduct an impact assessment before a tool is deployed. The law also explicitly states that it doesn't provide a private right of action. It grants the Attorney General exclusive authority to enforce and promulgate rules under the Colorado AI Act. And developers or deployers can assert an affirmative defense based on discovery and cure of an alleged violation. Violation of the law constitutes an unfair trade practice under the state's consumer protection law, with civil penalties up to $20,000 per violation. Colorado's bill, even though it was enacted last year, it will not be effective until 2026. And following the passage of this bill, Colorado's legislature created a task force aimed to work through differences and find consensus to make changes to this law. Colorado legislators introduced Senate Bill 318 this year with offered amendments from those discussions, but the legislature recently adjourned and the bill failed to pass. Also last year, Utah passed its Artificial Intelligence Policy Act, which imposes disclosure obligations on specific covered entities for their use of generative AI technologies. For violations of the law creates civil penalties calculated on a per violation basis. And the new law also creates two new entities, so an AI regulatory body, the Office of Artificial Intelligence Policy, and the AI Learning Laboratory Program, tasked with studying the impact of AI with companies deploying the technology in their state. To build off of the work that they did last year in Utah, they enacted another bill this year, SB 226 recently. It requires certain disclosures when generative AI and AI chatbots are used in consumer transactions and in regulated services, such as legal and medical contexts. So, for example, it covers legal and medical context, but it also specifically calls out uses within mental health services and chatbots. So that's an interesting thing to note out of that bill. But the new law establishes liability for violations of consumer protection laws involving AI. And this year, we've seen other states attempting to pass comprehensive bills. Virginia had a similar bill to Colorado's bill. Some of the definitions were a little different, so those were the main differences. Like they, also had algorithmic discrimination in their bill, consequential decisions. I think, like, for example, the consequential decisions in Colorado versus Virginia, there were some differences on like who or what sectors they were targeting or what context they would be applied on. Not major changes, but just a few. But so that bill ended up passing. Virginia's legislature, but the governor ended up vetoing it. So that's the closest bill that kind of made it to that finish line so far this year. I know California had a comprehensive bill that they also introduced that was making its way, I think, through potentially the next chamber. I don't know if it's gotten legs and will continue probably through the summer, but Texas also had a comprehensive AI bill that had similar flavor to Colorado, but introduced some concepts, I think, from maybe Texas's bill. So they created a regulatory sandbox, or they didn't create, they proposed to create a regulatory sandbox, really an environment where companies could apply to mitigate certain regulations or requirements to test and AI systems with the state and develop that together. So that was a proposal out of Texas, but it's similar flavor to Utah's bill that was passed last year that I referenced. And then another interesting element in Texas's comprehensive bill was a big investment within workforce development tied to AI. But that's what I prepared for this slide on kind of what those differences were. But happy to answer more specific questions if you have them.
Do folks have questions right now? What was the, sorry, do you know the Virginia bill number? I'm sure I can find it.
Yeah, it's HB 2094.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so as I mentioned, other approaches other than the comprehensive flavor of legislation, I'll call it, is, targeting more specific use cases. A popular trend last year was the enactments of laws targeted towards sexually explicit deepfakes and election-related synthetic content. So at least half of states passed over 40 new laws for deepfake technology, which uses AI to create false audio, images, or video. The first area that I have on this slide that legislators took action on is elections. So in 2024, 12 states enacted new laws related to the use of deepfakes in election and political messaging. And this year, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wisconsin also enacted new legislation here. States have taken a variety of approaches to what are in these types of bills, such as requiring a disclosure that a political advertisement used AI, or taking specific steps if the activity is near an election. Some newer proposals, and one that passed this year was prohibiting impersonation of a candidate using deepfake technology. I'll point out an example from Arizona last year because they passed two different laws in this area that took two different approaches. So one of the new laws allows a candidate to sue if a digital impersonation of the person is published. And the second new law requires disclosure of the use of a deep fake of a political candidate within 90 days of an election. A resource we have in this area and in NCSL's digital AI toolkit that I'll show you at the end of this presentation is a brief titled AI in Elections, a look at the federal and state legislative landscape, and it includes a lot more state examples if you're interested. Our next category is explicit content. So since 2019, 40 new laws have been enacted related to sexually explicit deepfakes. At least 19 state laws passed legislation related to sexually explicit deepfakes in 2024. Some of the new laws that have been enacted focus specifically on these types of materials depicting minors, and state approaches have varied. Florida, for instance, enacted legislation to establish a crime for the creation of computer-generated child pornography. Washington's new law amends their state's child pornography law to include digitally fabricated content. Among other elements, the law creates a civil cause of action for adult and minor victims impacted by the non-consensual disclosure of artificial and intimate images. And Indiana expanded their state's non-consensual image law to include unauthorized AI-generated content. And so you'll see from those few examples, some folks are creating new laws, some folks are amending and adjusting laws already on the books. And some of these definitions vary as well, as you could see as I was describing in the examples. The last category within the deepfake bucket is that states have been passing laws protecting the publicity rights or name, image, and likeness for performers from synthetic replicas. So the right of publicity is generally understood as the right to exploit the commercial value of a person's identity and allows a cause of action for the commercial exploitation of a person's name, voice, or image to prevent others from doing so without someone's consent. For example, Arkansas enacted a new law this year that created protections for an individual whose photograph, voice, or likeness is reproduced through means of AI and used commercially. During the 2025 legislative session, over 75 new laws have been enacted by state legislatures across the US. I wanted to include a snapshot for you so you can get a flavor of what's been happening because there has been a diversity of proposals out there, but it's always interesting to see what makes it over the finish line. So this slide includes some of the new laws coming out of the 2025 legislative sessions. I'll go through these examples here. So this year, Arkansas legislatures enacted legislation that clarifies who the owner of AI-generated content is, which includes the person who provides data or input to train a generative AI model, or an employer if the content is generated as part of an employment duties. The law also specifies that the generated content should not infringe on existing copyright or intellectual property rights. Colorado recently passed HB 1004, prohibiting residential rental property owners from using algorithmic or pricing algorithms to set rent rates. The bill passed the legislature, but is still waiting the governor's signature. Colorado is the first to pass this type of measure, but a handful of states, including Connecticut, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, Oregon, Virginia, and Washington introduced similar legislation this year. Montana's new right to compute law sets requirements for critical infrastructure that is controlled by an AI system, such as instructing the deployer to develop a risk management policy that considers guidance from a variety of listed specific standards, such as the latest version of the AI risk management framework from the National Institute of Standards and Technology. The new law also specifies that government cannot take actions that restrict the ability to privately own or make use of computational resources for lawful purposes unless deemed necessary to fulfill a compelling government interest. I wanted to highlight that side or that bill because we haven't seen one of that nature past the finish line yet. North Dakota's new law prohibits individuals from using an AI-powered robot to stalk or harass other individuals, expanding current harassment and stalking laws. And New Jersey adopted a resolution urging generative AI companies to make voluntary commitments regarding employee whistleblower protections. The last one I'll highlight on this slide in New York, they enacted a new law that requires state agencies to publish detailed information about their automated decision-making tools on their public websites through an inventory managed by their Office of Information Technology. Another interesting aspect of that law is that it amends their civil service law to strengthen worker protections, such as requiring when an AI system is used by the state government that it cannot affect the existing rights of employees pursuant to existing collective bargaining agreements, and requiring that an AI system does not result in displacement or loss of a position as well.
Chelsea, can you help me? The more I learn about AI, the more disturbing facts are revealed. Can you help me understand harassment and stalking with an AI-powered robot?
Sure. So I I guess in real world context, one, I think this is a unique bill. I haven't seen a lot of these popping up. This might be one of a few. I would say definitely the first that passed. But what I could imagine, right? I guess from use cases
That's
that
where
I've
I'm
been.
stuck. I can't imagine. So I'm curious to know what
Yeah,
it
yeah.
is.
What I guess what comes to mind, because there wasn't a ton, within like the analysis of the bill, kind of from the legislative staff. That's where I was kind of digging for the origin of where this came from. But for example, like drones, I don't know, like I guess the definition for robots was very broad within the statute, and so it considered, and I don't know off the top of my head, I could get back to you with the definition, but a robot using, AI technologies. And so I could imagine potentially a drone could be categorized potentially within that bucket. But I don't want to reach, and this is new. So that's kind of the only context that I can think of right now, because there are a lot of drones that are using AI technology, and they can be deployed, from far away and be used to, kind of fly over different objects or different areas. So don't want to speculate, but but that's the only thing that comes to mind in that bucket.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think I need any more information about that. Just, mental health wise today. Chris,
Do you know if this type of banning of robots would apply just to the general public and not to like law enforcement using a drone for surveillance at a given time? So that
Yeah, that's a really good question. So because this issue is so cross-cutting, I have a group of colleagues that I collaborate with across our departments. We have colleagues within our criminal and civil justice program that tracks this specifically. And I don't have the number offhand and can follow up with resources if you'd like, but there are a lot of states regulating in the area of AI drones and law enforcement, and creating specific requirements of what are allowable uses for them, when they can use it and when they can't. So like for example, I think I've seen some of the language in those bills, like it in terms of using like for in instance like public safety and over an event of a certain number and getting certain permissions, then it can be used. But then also we know, right, a lot of the body cameras right now are also incorporating AI. So then it bears the question, right? I guess how far it goes within these regulations. And so I think, folks are looking at targeted use cases, but I guess to sum it up, because I'm kind of going all over the place because there's a lot of action in this area, is there are, yeah, states looking at allowable and disallowable uses for drones for law enforcement specifically.
I just pulled up the North Dakota statute, which says very clearly at the top, as used in this section, robot means an artificial object or system that senses, processes, and acts using technology, including the associated elements, communication links, and artificial intelligence. The term includes remotely piloted aircraft.
Okay,
There we go.
But-
Thank you for looking that up.
Sure.
yeah, Tori.
Speaking of cross-cutting, are you seeing these bills originate in all different types of committees, or are there certain themes across the states and where these bills are originating?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think because they are cross-cutting, they have been popping up in different areas, right? So I was just looking at a bill, for instance, where Massachusetts made a major investment within I guess creating some sort of artificial intelligence hub. And so I was looking kind of where that originated. And interestingly, the kind of appropriations and finance committees were because it was such a big financial investment, they were kind of the leaders on that bill. So that's an example that comes to mind of maybe, I think the tech committees or other committees of those jurisdiction were involved. But that was an example of a different committee kind of being the leader. Obviously, the health type bills have been going through health committees and sometimes originating from health committees. Same with in the education sphere. But I will say another thing that we noticed is there are new committees being made in legislatures that either expand the jurisdiction of current committees or creating new committees in general. So, like, for instance, Texas created a new committee at the start of their legislative session this year. That's the Committee on Delivering Government Efficiency. Sorry, I have the acronym in my head, so I wanted to say the words out loud. But essentially, part of their jurisdiction is that they're getting bills routed to them and introducing bills that focus on AI and government use and AI more broadly. So yeah, there's a mix of things going on, I guess, amongst the states on how they're trying to determine like who has jurisdiction. But I think the bills now with us going over 1,000 just in the last few months from this legislative session, I think they're starting to come from a lot of different places. Okay, I can move on to this next slide. So as I mentioned at the top of the presentation, a major area where states have been taking action on is specific to government use of AI. And so for some perspective, last year, states considered over 150 bills related to government use in 2024, and that was for the whole year. Some state legislators kind of meet all year round or further into the year. But for reference, this year, just in the short amount of time we've had in 2025, we've surpassed kind of the number of the total that was introduced last year. So what we've been seeing is approaches vary, but there are some commonalities amongst how states have decided to regulate, oversee, deploy, and measure AI in government. You can also find more information through a brief that I helped author along with some colleagues that also staff our task force on AI cybersecurity and privacy. It's linked in our resource slide at the end. But essentially, state legislators, governors, and state agencies have considered various means to study and drive the use of AI for improving and transforming government services and to identify its potential risks. State across the nation enacted laws creating new entities to study and recommend the use of AI or integrating this work into already established bodies. At least 10 states have instructed state agencies to inventory and describe AI applications within their operations and that impact the services they deliver. And to address concerns and potential bias, discrimination, and disparate impact, states like Connecticut, Maryland, Virginia, and Idaho have mandated that state agencies run impact assessments to ensure that the AI systems in use are ethical, trustworthy, and beneficial. State legislatures have also established offices and other authorities to oversee AI implementation and make recommendations. For example, Florida created the Government Technology Modernization Council in 2024 to be an advisory council within their Department of Management Services. And the council is tasked with studying and monitoring the development and deployment of new technologies and providing reports on recommendations for procurement and regulation to the governor, the president of the Senate, and the Speaker of the House of Representatives. They are required to meet quarterly and make legislative and administrative actions that the legislature and state agencies may take to promote the development of data modernization in the state. We're seeing also a lot of states issued guidance on state agency use through a variety of means. So at the time of this report, there were around 30 states that did this, but how they did this differed. So some of this was like mandated or requested through governor executive orders. Some of it was through agency collaboration, rulemaking, and then of course state legislation. Some common elements we've seen across state guidelines include specifying roles and responsibilities, guiding principles, potentially new processes, training requirements, and of course, inventory requirements and impact assessments. And a few examples. So Georgia's AI responsible use guidance specifies that misuse of AI by state agencies can happen through AI-based fraud, discrimination, invasion of privacy, malicious use and spreading information. The same guidance warns that unintentional misuse can happen in cases of bias and discrimination, privacy violations, inaccurate or misleading information, inappropriate context, or an over-reliance on AI. Colorado, Georgia, Maine, Maryland, New York, North Carolina, North Dakota, and Washington all referenced the NIST standards within their guidelines. Those guidelines that I mentioned earlier that have come up in a few bills, but in contrast, New Hampshire based its guidelines on the European Union's ethics guidelines document on AI. But for those of you that aren't familiar with the NIST guidelines came from the National Institute of Science and Technology. So they published the Artificial Intelligence Risk Management Framework in 2023, which provides a guideline to promote safe AI technologies by addressing the specific risks across AI platforms. And the NIST framework, it really prioritizes fairness, transparency, reliability, and accountability. And the goal of the framework is to ensure ethical and safe use in both It was really intended for federal agencies and the industry to set standards for generative AI development and deployment. But as you can see from the examples I just stated, states are also looking to those guidelines for inspiration. State employees responsible for information technology and purchasing are also incorporating considerations for AI within their current procurement processes. California released guidelines for public sector procurement uses and training for generative AI. And so, in order for to use a generative AI product, state entities must go through a multi-step process that includes outlining a problem definition, assessing its impacts, and requiring a human to be in the loop. And state entities are allowed to submit budget requests through their annual budget process for generative AI proof of concepts. And California requires state purchasing officials to take training on how to identify generative AI purchases as well. Washington released an automated decision systems procurement and use guidance that requires an assessment to be conducted before the system's development or procurement. And the procurement and development process must also include testing and validation to assess the performance, accuracy, and potential bias before deployment. These next two slides are two state examples, and I know that I have your state as an example. I contemplated taking this out for your presentation, but really wanted to include it because wanted to recognize that you all started your efforts on your AI journey a lot sooner than other folks. And when I was doing kind of a review of all of the activities across the states and finding those commonalities with my colleagues for that report, Vermont really stood out of hitting kind of all of those elements. And so I can share with you all what you have done in your state since 2018 for folks that are newer, but I can also skip this slide if you think you have enough context and information. But I did want to say that,
Walk us through it. We're a new committee, and the more we're
Okay.
doing, the better.
Okay, great. So yeah, as I stated, Vermont was one of the first states to create an AI task force in 2018. There were amendments to that initial bill, and it was extended to meet a little bit longer and initial their final report in 2020. Based off of some recommendations from that task force, your state enacted legislation in 2022, creating the Division of Artificial Intelligence within the Agency of Digital Services to review all aspects of AI developed, employed, or procured by the state. The law also requires the agency to conduct an inventory of all automated decision systems and outlines what information must be collected through the inventory related to the technology, the impact it might have, the data it will use, how data will be secured, and testing requirements related to bias. The new law also required the division to propose a state code of ethics for AI government use to be updated annually and make recommendations to the General Assembly on policies, laws, and regulations for AI systems in the state government. One other thing that the law did was it established the Artificial Intelligence Advisory Council to provide advice and counsel to the director of the Division of Artificial Intelligence regarding the division's responsibilities to review all aspects of AI system use by the state agency and engage in public outreach and education on AI. And in response to those requirements from the new law, Vermont's AI Code of Ethics identifies conflict of interest, bias, and confidentiality concerns and highlights attributes to focus on when choosing an AI tool, such as safety, security, accountability, and trustworthiness. And the newly created council has also published guidance for AI usage, which has been approved and reviewed by their members. The next state I'll highlight is Ohio. So in Ohio, the policy for procuring new generative AI software requires review and approval from a multi-agency AI council that includes representatives from the governor's office and the Department of Administrative Services. And the request from agencies must include a risk assessment, a privacy assessment, and a security review. The policy also specifies that only data that is public record can be used in generative AI tools. The Department of Administrative Services released other resources related to implementation for state agencies to use, such as an AI governance framework and then a procurement process as they move through that process. And AI applications are currently in action in state government, initiated by, again, multiple points. So the state legislature has initiated some uses, the executive branch, and then specific agencies kind of on their own as well, with aims to transform government services in one fashion or another. So state legislatures have enacted legislation that includes funding for specific AI use in state government. Ohio's legislature appropriated funding for a Department of Medicaid pilot program using automation and artificial intelligence to provide program savings. Florida's legislature appropriated funds to the Department of Health for the development of an AI customer service solution. And in 2023, West Virginia created a pilot program to incorporate machine learning, AI, or other advanced technologies to assess state roads. In 2024, the Hawaii legislature appropriated funds to the University of Hawaii to establish and implement a 2-year program to develop a wildfire forecast system for the state using AI technology. West Virginia created oh, sorry, I already went over that example. In Arkansas, moving on to the executive branch initiated actions, the governor launched a working group tasked with reviewing a set of pilot projects, and they're very specific. So one is on unemployment insurance fraud, and the other one is on recidivism reduction to really use as a kind of model and a test to craft best practices for safe implementation of AI across state government. California's governor announced in the spring of 2024 partnerships with 5 vendors to test, iterate, and evaluate Gen AI through proofs of concept. So use cases focus on reducing highway congestion, language translation within government service delivery, and assisting with healthcare facility inspections. Development of these tools will happen in a secure sandbox environment led by the California Department of Technology. And at the conclusion of the process, the Office of Data and Innovation will help assess future agreements, like if the project should continue or if there should be other projects that are initiated. Pennsylvania's governor launched a pilot program which provided state employees with access to the ChatGPT enterprise to emphasize efficiency, streamline workflows, and improve the delivery of government services. And jumping over to state-specific action, Ohio deployed an AI tool, Reg Explorer, to review and reduce words and redundancies in administrative code. And Oklahoma's Office of Management and Enterprise Services is using AI to monitor how taxpayer dollars are being spent within state agencies. So I wanted to give you kind of array of activities happening because there's, as you can see, there's a ton of ways that folks are thinking of using AI in government systems and a ton of ways they're figuring out of how to deploy it. But I wanted to highlight quickly some survey results from 2024. This was a survey of state technology directors and their state's use of AI. And so that survey showed half of states are using chatbots. 36% are using it for office productivity, and 26% are using it for code development. The survey also found the four highest ranked use cases for AI were cybersecurity, citizen portals, data management and analytics, and officer worker efficiency. This year, states have continued to pass laws related to government use of AI. Even though I showed you a ton of states have been active in this area, there are still some states that are either starting this work or continuing this work. So Arkansas enacted HB 1958, which requires public entities to create an AI policy that defines authorized uses of AI for that entity and requires a human to be involved with the final outcome of a decision assisted by AI. And the new law also requires training associated with the new AI policy. The Georgia General Assembly created the Senate Study Committee on Artificial Intelligence. Kansas enacted HB 2313, which prohibits specific AI applications from being used on state-owned or issued devices like DeepSeek and AI models controlled by a country of concern, is the term in the legislation. And then Mississippi's new law creates the Artificial Intelligence Regulation Task Force, and Montana adopted a joint resolution to create an interim committee to study artificial intelligence. In 2024, the spring of 2024, NCSL surveyed 8 legislative staffing groups about their use of generative artificial intelligence tools for legislative work. My colleague Will Clark manages this work. I'll go over the key takeaways from the survey, but I've also included my colleague's contact information at the end of this presentation. He's available for any questions or conversation on this topic, but there's also a link on that last resource page that has a link to all of the survey results if you want a deeper dive than what I'm sharing with you today. But the survey received over 79 responses from staff in 40 states, the District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico. And responses came from a variety of different staffers, from caucus, committee and member staff, House Assembly clerks, Senate secretaries, as well as from audit, fiscal, human resources, IT, library, and research offices. The survey asked if staff were 1, currently using generative AI tools, 2, considering using generative AI tools, 3, aware of legislators or other legislative staff using generative AI tools, and 4, aware of a policy in their office about usage of generative AI tools for legislative work. Survey respondents indicated that legislative staff, both partisan and nonpartisan, have begun to use generative AI tools to aid legislative work, and even more are considering their use, including ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, and Sonix. Staff are also using these tools to write emails, transcribe hearings and debate, assist with formulas and programming, edit text, conduct research, develop position descriptions and job descriptions, create summaries, and to enhance cybersecurity. And results from the survey also show that legislative offices have begun to regulate staff usage of generative AI tools, but these approaches vary widely, and many legislatures have not yet adopted policies or guidance. This slide shows the responses for a question regarding if their office currently has an AI usage policy. And respondents demonstrate that policy options are along the spectrum. So strategies include prohibiting the use of AI tools outright, encouraging staff to exercise judgment and critical thinking when using the AI tools, setting, an allowable list for AI tools and uses, and requiring consent from a manager prior to staff usage. Here's a slide of NCSL's resources related to AI policy. The first link is to NCSL's Artificial Intelligence Policy Toolkit. And this toolkit includes a variety of resources, including policy primers, legislative tracking databases, issue briefs, and podcasts. The resource spans many topic areas that I've mentioned today, so elections, healthcare, workforce, criminal justice, and more. I regularly meet with those coworkers to make sure that we have those resources that they're creating in their different respective areas on this main landing page, because sometimes it's a good problem to have, but we have a lot of resources on our website, and so we thought it was great to pull them all together if they were specifically related to AI. There's some links on this slide that are specific to the legislative tracking lists and the data that I mentioned in today's presentation. So in the toolkit, you'll find lists dating back to 2019. And the toolkit also includes that article that I mentioned to you regarding legislative trends from 2024. And the last grouping of resources that could be useful are a series of briefs that NCSL's Task Force on AI, Cybersecurity, and Privacy have published related to AI regulation in the areas of elections, workplace, and government use. I failed to mention in my response about law enforcement and AI, we do have a brief within this toolkit on that specific topic if you're interested to take a look. And the last resource on this slide is that survey that I just read you the results from. There's some more updated result or more in-depth results on that page. But I heard from my colleague we're working on a survey this year, so hope to continue to have learnings and information from that work. We hope to see you in Boston at NCSL's Legislative this summer to celebrate NCSL's 50th anniversary with your colleagues. We will also be having summit sessions on technology and AI. So topics range from, balancing innovation and regulating AI to AI and the energy grid to legislative use of AI and a federal technology legislation update, robotics, just to name a few. And here's our contact information. Like I said, as members of NCSL, beyond this presentation right now and spending time with you here, I'm always happy to hop on the phone or do a deep dive into any of these areas that I covered today to provide you with more information. So I know you all stopped me for some questions during the presentation, but happy to take some more if they came to you as we were going through the slides.
Great. That was incredibly helpful. Do folks have questions now for Chelsea? I know I'll be in touch over the summer for sure. So really appreciate that presentation, Chelsea. It was so helpful, and NCSL is an amazing resource. So thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much, Chair and members. And again, feel free to reach out anytime. Look forward to speaking with you more soon.
Appreciate it. Thank you so
Chelsea.
much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we've got just a quick committee heads up. So it looks like, I think this is a definite. There's a miscellaneous environmental bill H319 that came out of the Environment Committee on our side, went over to the Senate, went to the Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee. And they've been working on it for, for a while. And 95% of the bill is not our committee jurisdiction, but it looks like they have added a little bit of language about the Rygate biomass plant up in Kingdom. It's in the Kingdom, right?
Not down to Rygate. Is that Rygate still in the kingdom?
Anyway,
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah. Rygate is where it always has been. But anyway, they've added a little bit of language about Rygate. And they're going to want us to take a quick look at it. Our committee won't officially possess the bill. We'll take a straw poll. So to get ready to do that, I've got a couple of things that I'm starting to line up. One, I thought it'd be helpful for all of us. Betsy Ann, the House Clerk, is going to come in 15 minutes after floor. So Jack's going to add that to the agenda and just walk us all through House rules. So we've been seeing this is the time of the year when amendments start ping-ponging back and forth. And we had something similar on S50 where we didn't take possession of the bill, but we did a quick flyby and did a straw poll. And we've got another one now in our laps, and who knows, we may have more before the session ends. So I thought it'd be helpful for Betsy Ann to come in and walk us through the House rules on how that all works. So she's going to come in 15 minutes after the floor, and then we'll have Ellen, Ledge Counsel, come in and walk us through just that language of the bill. And just so folks know that it's like a 50-page bill. So we will just be looking at the part that falls within our committee jurisdiction, which is however long the Rygate language is, and I haven't seen it yet. But my understanding is that this is I think, an ongoing issue with Rygate, and I know Rep. Sibilia and maybe Rep. Torrey have been in last year's committee to hear testimony about this, but
Many years.
yeah, this is an ongoing issue. This is not a brand new issue. It's very familiar to the legislature. So Rygate has been asked or has been required to put in more efficient equipment. They're struggling to get that done. And they're asking for a 1-year extension.
And 20 megawatt plant. They're also adding in pellet manufacturing to it.
Great. So we'll hear from,
Where do they sell their juice? Is that part of?
Yeah.
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 So they have a special power purchasing agreement.
It's right on the connecting
With both.
Yeah. But
It may be.
we can learn all about this. So we're going to get Betsy Ann so we all understand how the House rules work about Senate proposals of amendment and what our role is. We're going to get Ellen in to walk us through the language. Obviously, we'll get Rygate in. So right now I'm thinking Betsy Ann can come right after the floor. I'm looking to see if Ellen can come at 8:30 tomorrow morning. So that would be a change to our agenda. Then we'll need to hear from Rygate, and I would think that after hearing from Ellen, we'll have a sense of whether we need to hear from anybody else.
TJ Core, because I know he was involved with that with TV. Someone that we should hear from as well.
I don't know, but we certainly
I know
can
he was
reach out to
involved with
him.
that.
I think it would be reasonable to ask the department if they're supporting this extension.
Okay,
So it's a power generator and they're selling to our utilities. So
we'll
even
get-
if they just weigh in with us, like
Yeah.
via memo or something.
Yeah, there's
Sure.
a draft permit decision online that is looked at as well, but they do show that there's no.
okay, so we'll get, I don't even have the language yet. So once I have the language from Ellen, I'll send that. Rygate's aware of it because Rygate requested it. So I don't need to send the language to Rygate, but I'll send the language to TJ, I guess, or the commissioner and see what they want to say. And I know the Senate only heard from Rygate. So we'll have a couple days, like all bills like this, it'll go straight to the notice calendar, but so that Betsy will walk us through all this, but Senate votes it out. They message it to us. It goes on the notice calendar. and it's up for action on the floor the next day. And just like we did with S50, I'll stand up and give a brief spiel on who we heard from and what our straw poll results were. So that's kind of all I know right now, but.
Is environment happy with what the Senate did? Or is this a Senate bill or a
It's a House bill.
House bill? And so are they okay with?
They're gonna look at all their parts, and just like us, Chair Sheldon hasn't even looked. She was looking at it this morning
Okay.
and just noticed that the bill had like doubled in length. So similarly, while we're looking at the Rygate part, House Environment's going to be, or House, yeah, our committee's going to be looking at everything else the Senate did, and they'll do a straw poll too.
Would it be helpful to share more of the contours of previous discussions, or do you want to wait?
Let's wait. I mean, I don't even know what it is yet. So let's wait. I don't want to get too far out in front. When Ellen comes in, we'll have an hour tomorrow. So Ellen can walk us through the language, and then folks on our committee who've followed this and been in committee and know a lot more about the history can just chime in, because I don't. This is new to me. Okay. So 15 minutes after floor. I won't stand up and remind us, just Jack can add it to the agenda, and we'll meet with Betsy Ann today. Yeah, and then 8:30 tomorrow, assuming Ellen's available.
She looks free. I sent her the invite, waiting to hear back.
Okay, and then as soon as I have the language to send, I'll send that to the department, and we'll make sure that we're hearing from them too. But we can, Jack, can you reach out to TJ right now?
Yep.
And just say, just give him the broad scope of this, copy me on it so I can clarify anything. Tell him we'll send him the language. They're probably already well aware of whatever the Senate is doing.
H319.
H319. But I can tell you right now, I called it up this morning and I don't even see the language yet. So you go looking for it, maybe you'll find it. But Ellen will send it to us. Ellen drafted it. It may just not be online yet, but it might be. Okay, that's it. We can go off live.